Alright boys, welcome back to another video. Thunder Alley here, and today we're going to be talking about Joey Bosa because he has struggled with groin, hamstring, and foot injuries in the last two seasons, limiting him to just 14 games and keeping him from his previous form. After a dominant Week 1 performance against the Las Vegas Raiders, where he was the best player on the field, Bosa was limited in practice all of this week, including a no-go on Thursday when it was open to reporters. Now, before you guys say I'm overreacting, and let me make it abundantly clear, I'm not trying to be that guy that's saying Bosa's going to have another injury-prone year. Of course, yeah, the Chargers are just being cautionary with him. They've got the Panthers on Sunday. They don't need a fully healthy Bosa to win that game. But at the same time, the Chargers lost, what guys, 8 games last season by 1 score? So it's just something to monitor moving forward, especially because the Chargers, they can't afford to be without a healthy Mac and Bosa this year. The AFC is just too competitive. If they want to get to where they want to go, they need these guys healthy, right? Justin Herbert is the most important player on this team. We saw that last year, even with how bad the defense was. The Chargers were still pretty competitive with Herbert out there because of how good he is. But outside of him, the front is going to dictate where our season goes. Both the edges, of course, and the interior defensive line. So let's get into it, man. So Bosa, he did not practice on Thursday. We'll see if he practices tomorrow. That's when the Chargers are going to release their final injury report. That will be out in the afternoon. So we'll wait and see on that. I do think Bosa will play on Sunday. I think he'll be limited though. I don't think he'll be playing every single snap or as many as he did against the Raiders. So in terms of Khalil Mack though, this is something that kind of has flown under the radar, is that, well, last season we know Mack had a career year. He went out and he had 17 sacks. The Chargers had a bad year, so that's why it wasn't really talked about. But Mack, maybe his best season, and then you throw that in with the fact that, well, Bosa, he was a guy who potentially could have been cut or traded in the offseason, but he takes a pay cut to stay with the Chargers. Next season will be sort of questionable to see if Bosa's back. Hopefully he ends up finishing his career as a Charger because, you know, Keenan Allen's a guy that I would have liked to see finish his career as a Charger. That didn't happen. So hopefully Bosa can. But the reason why Bosa ended up taking that pay cut was because he wanted to continue to play with Khalil Mack because he understands that the both of them on the field together is going to be pretty much unstoppable, right? We talk about the Chiefs and the dynasty they're building. They've won 2 straight Super Bowls. They're trying to win their 4th in 5 years, whatever. Well, if they go up against a fully healthy Khalil Mack, a fully healthy Joey Bosa, this new defensive interior that the Chargers have put together, not to mention that you look at the Chargers depth chart, I mean, there are 2 backup edges rushing after the quarterback, which start on a lot of teams. Of course, you know, going out in, you know, free agency and signing Bud Dupree, right? That was a big time move for the Chargers. And then another thing is just a guy that they drafted in Tuli Tuipulotu is someone who, you know, both these guys, like, they were on the field at one point altogether against the Raiders. And I think they're going to do big things this year. So this front gives you a chance to come after Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and Joe Burrow and CJ Stroud. So whenever the Chargers take on a top team in the AFC, they believe that they're going to win the matchup up front. And that's more often than not how you win games in football. You know, college football is all about winning up front. Of course, Jim Harbaugh and his staff, that's where they came from, Michigan. But in the NFL, it's the same thing. You don't win up front, good luck. You know, the Chiefs, they've got a great offensive line. You know, their interior is as good as it gets in the league. And then their defensive front, led by, you know, Chris Jones, and they also had, you know, a couple other players that were getting high sacks, you know, over 10 or up there, right? So that's what the Chargers are trying to build. They're trying to run the football, and that's what they did against the Raiders. They go out there, and J.K. Dobbins, they absolutely unleash him. He finishes, you know, 10 for 135 and a touchdown. Gus Edwards saw 11 carries, and overall the Chargers ran the ball 27 times. They only threw the ball 17 times, and I didn't think this was the greatest game for the Chargers. There is a lot of work to do, but this was a good start, very good start to the Harbaugh era, and there wasn't very many complaints from me at all in this game. Yeah, just seeing Bosa last year watch Mack have an unbelievable season, it had to have been inspiring, and he understands that, hey, look what happened. They both are out there against the Raiders, and we see, of course, Bosa forces a fumble. Mac picks it up, nearly scores, and then the guys were both getting in on sacks. It was just a great performance and good sign to come for sure for this Chargers team. And I think Harbaugh just said it best. I remember on Monday he was speaking to reporters and he ended up interrupting one of them and saying that he didn't just want to talk about Joey Bosa, he wanted to talk about Khalil Mack too. I mean, both these guys are just as good as it gets, and it's a lot of fun. And with the right staff around the team, which clearly it is, I mean, I have full faith in what these guys are trying to do. This team is going to be able to do big things. I know a lot of people are talking about how, this year, the Chargers, they're just trying to have a winning record. They're just trying to set themselves up for the future. I know a lot of people are high in the Chargers next year, but to me, I think the Chargers are ready to go right now. I'm not saying to win a Super Bowl because I don't know, man. A Super Bowl is a big stretch. Winning a Super Bowl, we know how hard that is. I think it's going to take some time. But in terms of just this season, I do think the Chargers are going to be one of the more competitive teams in the AFC. Can they compete with Kansas City for the division? We'll have to wait and see. From what I saw in the first game, I definitely think they're on the right track. But I do need to see more out of the passing game because that's going to be a big thing for me, right? The Panthers game is also going to be a big test for the Chargers, not because the Panthers are a great team, but because if that's a close game, I mean, we're basically right back to where we started, coming into the season. And that's just, this is the same Chargers team that, once again, should be blowing the brakes off of these lower teams, trash teams, and all of a sudden they're in a close game with them, right? And that was the Chargers of last year. So the Chargers, they've got to absolutely blow out the Panthers in this game. There's just no other way around it. Continue to run the ball. In terms of the passing game, I'd like to see Ladd McConkey get 5 targets, or actually 7 targets. He caught 5 of them. Quentin Johnston saw 5 targets. Josh Palmer saw 4 targets. 2 of those targets to Palmer, of course, were not catchable. So I just want to see Herbert get on the right page with these guys. This is a perfect game to do that. And the Saints, they 47-10 was the final score of that game. Derek Carr threw the ball 23 times. Justin Herbert in the Raiders game only threw it 26 times. So actually about the same. So yeah, I mean, you can absolutely score a bunch of points and not be that competitive a game and still throw the ball. It's just a good practice, a good test for Herbert, and we'll see what happens with that. The last thing that I want to touch upon is going to be Poona Ford, because, I mean, we're talking about a guy who was absolutely just unbelievably good in that Raiders game. He ended up catching his first career interception. He was routinely clogging lanes for Raiders rushers. The Raiders finished in total, they had 71 yards and 3.2 rushing yards per carry. I mean, Ford, he was just all over the place for the Chargers, and he was the second highest rated Chargers player in the game. The first one was Bosa, second was Ford, and then third was Mack. So it goes to show that we talk about how good Bosa and Mack were, but Ford was right in the middle between those guys. And I mean, he was a player who the Chargers signed for cheap. So clearly this team is heading in the right direction with all the moves they made in free agency and the staff and the way they're coaching. This is the first game. The Chargers are only going to improve. And I don't like to overreact too much from week 1, but the Chargers, they're on the right path, and I think the Raiders are on the wrong path. But again, anything can change in week 2. The Raiders, they can beat the Ravens and completely change that, and then the Chargers can be in a close game with the Panthers and beat them or just lose flat out. So, but yeah, stay tuned for more updates, guys. Peace.